All right, we are live and on air. Welcome back this week to another Kickoff Labs marketing chat. For those of you that don't know, Kickoff Labs enables you to power a viral email marketing campaign where you can collect email addresses, generate customer referrals, run contests, do pre-launches, all sorts of cool uses with our product. One cool use in particular is how you can do a campaign before you launch your crowdfunding. We've had a lot of customers, we've talked to them in our past webinars, that before they launch their actual crowdfunding campaign, they will use Kickoff Labs to collect a lot of email addresses so that they've got already a seeded set of customers to go ahead and pre-order the launch of their product. I'm excited about today's webinar because we've got with us Bhavin from Celery, and we are going to talk about Kickass Crowdfunding without Kickstarter. So we'll get into Bhavin and what Celery is in a minute. In the meantime, just to lay out a couple of ground rules for people that are here, please go ahead and on the live webinar page, post any questions in the chat. We will do our best to pause every now and then and take a look at the questions in the chat. If you have any problems, post that into the chat. We do want to make these events more interactive, and it's important that if you've got something you're like, hey, how did they do that, or what is it about this that made it work so well for you guys, or works well for customers? I think it's a great thing to do, and sometimes we can gloss over events, but otherwise we've got kind of a set of slides to walk through today, and we're going to talk to Bhavin and have it a little bit conversation, but a little bit structured by the slides. So we're going to try somewhere in the middle there. None of this is too rehearsed, so hopefully it comes off well for you guys. And so that said, let's get started. Hopefully everybody sees the slides. As I said, I am Josh Ledgard, the founder at Kickoff Labs. And with me today is Bhavin Shah. So Bhavin, tell me a little bit about your story and Celery.
Oh, okay. Well, I got a couple good things for that one. So yeah, I'm Bhavin. I've been here about 9-10 months at Celery. I joined on when there was a big need to kind of grow out our customer base and kind of look for the best ways to really treat our customers and get them to be successful in their crowdfunding campaigns or just their pre-orders in general. Before that, I'd spent a couple years in customer success, and I did some nonprofit work as well. And yeah, it's just been a really exciting past couple of months. We get to work with great customers like Boosted Board and all the devices, and we get to work with great partners like yourself. So
You
really,
work with Boosted Board?
yep, that was one of our first clients way back when. So we've
Awesome.
worked with quite a few of them. They actually went through YC with us. So we've kind of seen everything from the biggest guys to everyday sellers, and we're happy to support the needs of all of them. So again, I just want to say thank you to Kickoff Labs for hosting us and letting us chat about how to do pre-orders.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. You said Boosted Board. I was one of the people who pre-ordered on Boosted Board, so I probably didn't even realize I was using Celery at the time. So I've
Yep.
got my Boosted Board, and it's a pretty cool product.
Very
Um,
cool.
all right, let's see. So Celery is obviously it's a way to run a crowdfunding campaign, and an obvious question that a lot of people might have is obviously everybody knows the name Kickstarter out there. Tell me why somebody would choose to use Celery, or the question on the screen is why crowdfund on your own as opposed to I could just go to Kickstarter and I could post a video and get my product up there. They've got an audience built in already potentially that I could leverage into. Tell me why.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that I think anybody that's looking to crowdfund or to run their own campaign really should be thinking about, and for a couple different reasons. I think one of the biggest things is that marketplaces can be deceptive, and they can also be you can get lost in the crowd quite quickly. I don't know if you guys or any of your listeners out there are aware of this, but a big best practice that both Kickstarter and Indiegogo go on is that you should get 30 to 50% of your traffic organically on your own for your campaign to be successful. And when they say traffic, that means your amount pledged. And this is something that can be a little bit tricky because you're working towards trying to build this audience, but then you're building it on a platform that you can't control. So that in itself can be a little bit difficult because you're doing all the work, but you're then crowd sharing it for other projects and also Kickstarter itself. Beyond that, one of the biggest things that Kickstarter has issues with, and Indiegogo as well, is that it's an all or nothing system. Indiegogo has gone a bit beyond that with the whole flexible goals, which allows you to collect money if you don't meet your goal. But that's a pretty big thing to consider. How do you structure your campaign? Do you decide to say, okay, we're going to publicly say we need $100,000, and if we don't make it, then all your campaign efforts were for naught? Yeah. And especially when you're tied into only a 30 or a 60-day period for that, it then puts you on a clock. So while you're trying to build this virility and this viral nature to kind of leverage this marketplace, you're actually doing quite a lot of the work on your own. So it's one thing that we've kind of helped to step in, and we think to ourselves, how can we help these companies do it a little bit more efficiently on their own and allow them the flexibility to run the campaign the way they want? One thing that I also would like to say is that along with being an all or nothing platform, Kickstarter and Indiegogo require you to then collect all that money up front. And that leads to a whole different set of issues when it comes down to actually having to deliver the product. The name of the game in crowdfunding is consumer confidence. And as we've all seen with certain projects out there, it's very easy for that consumer confidence to go virally bad when something goes wrong or you have delays.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we all have probably even been a part of a campaign that's done that. I can tell you I have. I'm still waiting for my board game, and it's been about 2.5 years. And so that's one of the things that with Celery, and that's something that crowdfunders need to be aware of, is that if you have the option to kind of hold off on collecting the funds, it just helps you create more of a sense of a community with your backers, and also just more consumer confidence in general. Use the money as you need to, not as you have to. And I think that's something that buyers and backers really do appreciate.
Yep.
So.
And I think that's what I think that kind of leads into what we're talking about here, which is if your goal is to launch a sustainable business, not a product, to think about creating your own brand identity, keeping the traffic from it, as you point out, which is a really important thing. I mean, we tell people all the time, get off of our subdomain. You should be using your own domain for it, so that when you're done with your pre-launch and you're done with your email contest, it's on your domain and you own that traffic from now going forward, right? All right, so I think we touched mostly on this when we talk about launching a business, because you kind of answered a lot of why you would want to launch the business, thinking about the revenue and how you collect the money. But now let's talk about the flow. So this is obviously a reason why you would build your own site and for your crowdfunding campaign. So tell me about the advantages of creating your own flow as opposed to using a standalone system.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that goes again back into the flexibility. When you use a crowdfunding platform, you have to kind of use your established pledge idea, which is that your backer is essentially pledging towards a potential goal. When you create your own flow, you give yourself a lot more opportunities. You don't need to play with a lot of the bells and whistles and sometimes the tchotchkes that you would have to do in a crowdfunding campaign. And I think that's a big difference. I think that flow also allows you to set up a system where you're collecting money not only responsibly, but also in the best way that's approached for both your company and for your consumers.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's the advantage to that, which is you get that flexibility. Do you think that there's a disadvantage in that a lot of people maybe like the structure of like, okay, I have to set up early bird rewards, I have to set up a reward for $1 pledges, and I have to set up a reward for $300 pledges? Do you think that people miss that structure a little bit, or do you guys work with people to provide like good best practices and structure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the biggest thing that we kind of help with our clients is that we kind of steer them away from that aspect of having these so to speak tchotchke kind of reward levels. Yeah. I think the $1 rewards, and if you look at a lot of major campaigns, that's one of the ones that it makes people maybe a bit invested, but it's not something that will definitely convert into a sale later on or convert into being able to deliver the product. So when we set it up, we keep the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Yep. And we make sure that they set up the projects in a way where they can actually handle it and really sell the product, in the absolution. That being said, our back end allows you to do early bird specials. We have a fully implemented coupon system as well as an inventory limit system. So if you do want to run some specials or try to create a more aggressive call to action, we absolutely can help you out with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a balance to be struck there. Like I've seen a lot of the tchotchke type rewards, and I think people go overboard with those. And like you said, I mean, we see the same thing collecting email addresses on Kickoff Labs. Is that if people give away as a reward, like let's just say people say like sign up for my product to know when it's available, and I'll give you an iPad. You can get 100,000 email addresses really fast running a contest like that, but the iPad did not relate to your customers. So 99% of the people who sign up for your email list are not going to purchase your product because they were in it for the iPad. And so I think even if people do go to choose, early bird rewards and specials and tchotchkes, it's important for them to really think about, are these tchotchkes things that somebody who buys our product would want? Do they complement our product? Do they go with our brand, right? As opposed to just like, hey, a signed T-shirt or something that's cool or nifty along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And another big thing with kind of creating your flow is that you can also better fit your, like kind of like you're saying, you're better fitting your audience. The crowdfunding model is that your backer will put their money as a pledge, and then if the campaign is successful, the money is collected there and then. And while a lot of buyers have become comfortable with that, a lot of buyers have also been burned by that. So when you're creating your own, kind of going into your next slide, when you're trying to create your success, you need to acknowledge and really understand that what is my customer base looking for, and is collecting the money up front, or is charging them or allowing them to make changes. What do they need to do to be successful? What do we need to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve by getting our product?
Yeah, and so we've touched a little bit on this earlier in the point, but I think a lot of people have the assumption, and they even have it with Kickoff Labs, that if they go and they set up a contest or campaign on Kickoff Labs, that if you build it, they will come mentality sort of applies, right? I see so many people that say like, hey, I did all this and your product's not really working for me, and I look at their account and I say, yeah, I mean, you got 100 people came to your site, you got 30 signed up, that's a great conversion rate. Now you get 100,000 people to show up to your site with a 30% conversion rate, and you'll be set. And they're like, well, how could you do that for me? And that's the point where it just like there's some people that just don't get that. And I think people believe that if they use an established site like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, that just gives them traffic for free. And so, is that true or not true?
Sorry, I just in the majesties of electronics, I think I may have just lost you for a quick second. Could you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, I was asking about the sources of traffic and creating your own success, and people have this belief that that if they sign up on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or an established site like that, that their job of traffic generation is pretty much done, that they don't have anything really left to do, and there's more risk in setting it up on their own. So can you talk about the realities of what kind of where your traffic comes from when you set up on these sites versus on your own?
It's largely the same. It's a funny thing that's kind of inherent with the system, is that when you're trying to build your audience, the big benefits of having a marketplace is that you're more discoverable. But the problem is the people that are discovering you are usually going to be prompted by either your own marketing efforts, your own ad buy efforts, or just your own connections. Again, like kind of what I was saying before, is that a lot of these platforms, they're looking, they recommend that you want to get at least 30 to 50% of your traffic and of the pledges on your site coming from your own sources. So that's really what it comes down to. I mean, I think the big thing that people tend to forget is that, they think a platform can be a set and forget thing. The most successful campaigns out there, especially the ones we're talking are Bowbacks jackets or Coolest Coolers or what have you, throughout the entire process, they were actively managing. They were buying ads. They were reaching out. They were doing everything else. You never stop acquiring, so to speak. And so that's one thing that, regardless of what you end up using, you always have to keep in mind. Once you start, you need to commit to a plan and move forward. You can't just wait and see in that sense.
It's so overused, but it's so true that the people who have success on both the crowdfunding campaigns and contests and pre-launch campaigns on Kickoff Labs are the people that hustle. I mean, they're the people that go out and talk to customers, and they start with an inner circle of their friends and family. They progress to like their associates and work people, and they go to that next ring of people. And along the way, they're identifying who the potential customers could be. They're talking to them, and they're refining their marketing message. and then they take it to the next step and say, now I'm ready to start running some ads. Now I'm ready to start going engaging this community of people that like travel jackets, right? Now I'm ready to go do this, and then they talk to more customers there, and then they keep going to bigger and bigger circles along the way. And do you find that's the case as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things that we've seen, especially in the Bay Area, that's where we're based at least, is that these initial first customers, it's all about building the communication, the connection. I think if there's one thing I would like to say with any aspect of crowdfunding, it's communication. Whether it's, to trust, to let your backers know where you are on schedule, or to get them in the first place. And one of the most successful strategies I've seen is literally getting out and finding the customer base and reaching out to them before anything else. Because once you have that dedicated dedicated evangelists, they will do the marketing for you. They are your biggest strength and ally.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we talked about. I don't know if you watched the webinar we did with Glowforge, but that was key to their strategy, right? I mean, they had they started with 1,000 people, and they turned those 1,000 people into evangelists to get 5,000 people. They turned those 5,000 people into evangelists to get 10,000 people, and so on and so on and so on until they'd raised millions of dollars. And that's how it has to work. And you're so right that engagement throughout the process, before, during, and after, is so critical to build trust and to build an audience that is going to tell other people about you. Because you may think you're hitting people over the head with your message, and the reality is you're not, because you live in your message every single day, and so you're scared to send out more emails like, oh, I talk about this all the time, but to customers who have lives that do other things, you're not talking about this all the time. You're talking about it once a week, or a couple times a week, plus some Facebook posts. And if they're into your product, they'll be into those messages.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is to foster that relationship is to have those literal conversations. It's what you see a lot of with a lot of campaigns, especially the ones that struggle, is that they'll build these big lists, and then they'll get a big Facebook group. But then once the responses start coming in, they're not being proactive. They're not trying to do things to engage their consumer base. I think one of the best things I've seen is the projects that will involve the customers into the experience of development themselves. Not necessarily helping make any decisions, but letting them feel like they have more of an ownership. I mean, that's what your first customers have to be. They have to have the ownership.
Yeah, they have to feel engaged, and I always like to say, they have to feel like they're part of a movement, right? They have to feel like this is something that me and my friends would like, and I want to be a part of it. And you have to make them feel like they are a part of it, and they are a special part of it by being part of that movement. So let's talk about the start of a movement. The slide says start collecting emails now, and I tell people that all the time. I mean, I could be biased because our product is an email generation platform, but I don't care. You use our platform. I mean, I'd like you to use ours. I don't care. You use our platform or something else. Some people just they have this belief that I'll just start collecting emails a week before the pre-sale is ready, and they don't realize how long it takes to build momentum. And I talked to somebody the other day, and he's like, oh, I'm going to run this for 2 weeks, and I'm going to do my Kickstarter campaign right after that. And I asked him, I was like, what kind of momentum do you think you're going to get in 2 weeks? You've barely tested a message, and he's like, oh, you think I should hold off an extra week? I said, I think you should set a goal that says I need 5,000 email addresses before I launch my Kickstarter campain.
Oh God, yeah, I absolutely agree.
And then once then you work towards that goal, and if you can achieve that goal, then you'll have extra time to make sure everything about your crowdfunding campaign is set up exactly the way you want it. And when you launch that campaign, you won't be launching to crickets.
Yeah. Because I absolutely agree. It's one of those things. I mean, when we talk about having a game plan, and we see it all the time with projects. I mean, you see extremely successful companies. You see, I mean, even enterprise level companies are getting into the play. I mean, at Westfield, Science Instruments, they recently did a campaign about 6 months ago, and the response was kind of tepid. And you look at kind of the way they approached it. Well, they felt like they had all the ducks in a row, but they didn't really. From a lot of outside perspectives, companies like that don't, or campaigns like that have not been fully fleshed out. If you're thinking at the end of the day, oh, how do I make my campaign go live? Once a campaign goes live, you can't undo that. So it's one of those things. Absolutely, we have to find a good balance of what your goals are, and then what's the achievable goals too on top of that.
Yep. It's absolutely, and you can adjust your goals. You can say, I
Yeah.
want to click 5,000, and a couple weeks in, you're like, wow, I could probably get 10, and try and shoot for 10,000. Um, so the next slide says build a conversion-focused campaign, and I have some thoughts on that, but I'm curious what you think a good ideal of a conversion-focused campaign and what that means to your customers.
Well, that's a really interesting one because I think going to the scope of e-commerce, which is what we're working on, is we define conversions as do they click on pre-orders, do they enter their information, and do they complete the checkout flow, so to speak. But I think regardless of what it is, whatever you define your conversion rate, it's how are they getting to the message, how are they answering your call of action, and are you giving them all the tools they need to actually do that? So with something like Celery, it's like, is your landing page for the product, is it clear? Do you have clear guidelines, and do you also have a clear outline of when the product's going to be delivered? What should they expect? Again, communication. And
Yep.
then on top of that, on the other side is the checkout process easy for them? One thing that a lot of crowdfunders sometimes can forget is that when you're trying to crowdfund, you're looking everywhere. You're looking at customers maybe throughout an entire country or maybe even throughout the entire world. And so
Hmm.
if you're trying to do that, you need to make sure your checkout is going to be able to handle your audience as wide or as narrow as it is. And on top of that, can they get what they're looking for by either putting their email into the system or by clicking pre-order? Like, are they getting what they need? So I always think for building a conversion-focused campaign, it's how can I make this so easy and so clear that they'll just click yes and say, I want to join on right now. And that's something that your audience and your market's going to dictate. And unfortunately, there is no secret sauce, so to speak.
There's no secret sauce, but I think you hit on the things that are important, which is great communication and making it easy. I see the mistakes a lot of people make is just not able to accurately at least describe the what of a product, let alone the why of a product, right? And they focus on like, oh, I'm kind of stealth, but I'm not kind of stealth, and they don't describe what it is, and then they're collecting the wrong, they're getting the wrong conversions because of that, right? And so I always tell people like clearly at least describe the what of the product, and ideally you describe both the what and the why it's important to the audience in a really simple, easy to understand way. And then everything else you said about like, are you optimized for conversion? Like, is it really simple? Like, if I stand back from my computer screen and I look at this landing page for a crowdfunding campaign, do I know where to click buy? Right? I mean, it's just really simple, basic things. These buttons should not be buried below 10 pages of text on a screen that explain it.
Yeah, it's funny thing. So I actually have a little personal test that I always have whenever I'm trying to get a campaign to run. And I have a grandfather, and he's he's not the most technologically adept. But if he's able to complete the flow and understand it, that's usually a good sign for me. I think the thing is you have to remember your audience is going to come from a large, varied background of experience. And
Yep.
so you need to be able to not only acknowledge your audience, but also acknowledge maybe the less technologically adept. So that's if there's one thing I would say, get an older family or friend to check it out that maybe not be the most technology savvy, and if they can get through it, you're probably on the right track.
And if you don't have an older family member or friend, then you can go volunteer at a assisted living home, and
They will love. Oh God,
and they
they
will
would
love
love
you
it.
for it.
Yes, they would.
No, that's an awesome trick, just to like find the people that aren't like you, and that they're not setting up a crowdfunding campaign, they don't understand what's going on, and walk them through the process. That's a great strategy to do this. So tell us how, like, do you have an example of a campaign you can recall that told a really good story?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there's so many interesting campaigns that we've ran over the past couple of months, but I think one in particular that I really enjoyed was the Sphero BB-8 drone. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. The Sphero, remember when the Star Wars movie came out? There was the drone in it, kind of like R2-D2 of this movie.
Yep.
Well, Sphero is a company that we worked with, and they were running a campaign for that drone, and largely maybe it's a cop-out when I say their story was great, because obviously you can't really get much better than the Star Wars story, can you?
No.
But what they did was they built they knew what the release date of the movie was, and they built around these key metrics. Okay, we know when X is going to come out, we know when these trailers are going to come out. How can we use this to leverage our product, which is essentially a droid toy that they can just, they want to sell and have the hottest Christmas item out there. So I definitely think theirs is one that really sticks out in my head because they did a number of different things, everything from email collections to having an extremely active social media presence. Mm-hmm. And they actually, not only did they do the social media, but they actually reached out specifically to the Star Wars fan base as well. And they started building little messages. They did videos reenacting, scenes from the movie with this toy. And I just thought it was so clever. And it was one of those things I really just enjoyed about watching their success because they blew it out of the water with that droid, and we were really happy to be a part of that journey with them.
Cool. So tell me, so we talked a little bit about referrals, and you got, but tell me like how people should encourage, in your opinion, how people should get people who've signed up to share something with their friends, whether that just be sharing a page, after they sign up with email, or sharing a product that they purchase. Like, what are some of your best practices you think that get people really into telling their friends about it?
Well, I think that's a great one. I think the first thing I would say with that is, and I think this kind of goes with everything else, is don't just do it because don't just do it for the sake of doing it because you've read it somewhere. Yep. With all referral systems, you see them kind of show up in very different ways. It could be a monetary thing. It could be an exchange, a give-get type of referral system where the buyer will get a benefit and so will the receiver, whoever gets the email. But I think at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to make it very simple for them to actually be able to convert. So if you're going to have social referrals, it has to be immediate when they are doing it themselves. If you wait for them to do it after the fact, it's just going to get lost and the message is going to get forgotten.
Yep.
Remember, the moment the person signs up is the moment they're going to be most interested until they buy the product.
Absolutely.
So you need to leverage that, and you need to find a system that can do that as well. I'm happy to say that Celery has a really nice way of doing that from our email confirmation page and from the order confirmation. As soon as the person buys a product, they have the option to share or tweet about it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any which way. We also have referral systems that we work with that allow buyers that once they've completed the purchase saying, hey, if you refer to a friend and they sell it, you get $5 off and they get $5 off. And I think that stuff like that really has helped in the long term. I mean, referral systems, I think, is a huge booster. And not only that, but it helps build your evangelists too. So I also use referrals as a way to identify who's the person I want to talk to from my customer base. And that helps them just feel more engaged as well. And that also boosts referrals onto itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what you said, one of the things you said right in the beginning is definitely key, like the immediacy is that you shouldn't wait to try and get people to do referrals. Like as soon as somebody enters their email address or as soon as somebody has clicked purchase and completed the sale, like that's a person who's already said yes to you. So keep them on the yes train, right? Like, yep. Now you've done this, now do something else. And we do that with our landing pages. We send people to a thank you page that shows them the incentives, the reason to share, and then we also just immediately follow up with an email if people want that says, hey, you just did this, like go ahead and share it. And because I think there is also, like, although you don't want to get them later, a lot of people do purchase and they check out on a page, and then they just like, oh, I checked out, I'm done. So they might not see it, but then if you follow up also right away with a communication that says, hey, share it, they might check their email later, oh yeah, I should share this. And so I think it can work both ways in my experience, but definitely most critical way is just right after somebody takes an action to just get in their face, so to speak, and say, now take this next action.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are the biggest indications you look at to know whether a campaign is successful or not going to be successful?
That's a really tough one, but I think there's a couple big things that you can look at. I think this kind of goes back to, I think, what you said about goals, right? We need to define what are the goals you want to get out from to get the product off the ground. I'm not sure how many of your audience are aware of it, but a lot of Kickstarter projects, those goals may not be as indicative of what the need is. Sometimes the goals, it has to be based on what you think your audience needs and also what you need to do. So that being said, I think you need to always keep grasp of what is the end goal you're looking for, and then how can you achieve it. So whether it be a weekly update with your team or just checking in and just seeing the motion, where is the message resonating from. One thing that we find really interesting with a lot of campaigns is that they'll start out as a general campaign. Maybe it's addressed to the entire world, but then they'll start seeing orders filtering in from certain countries. And that actually helps impact how they then think about where they go next with their marketing techniques. So should we maybe focus more on England, or should we maybe focus more on this city because our product is directly in line with this sports team that's based out there? So there's different things that you have to look at, and you have to be kind of savvy with what am I identifying as the goal and how am I going to achieve it within the data that I have.
Cool. I mean, it's obviously it's important to think about your own personal goals and tracking the metrics to that. And so if your goal is that you need $10,000 in pre-sales, then obviously your base metric is like how fast you're going to get to there, how are your pre-sale conversion rates doing, and how many more visitors do you need to get that given your conversion rates, right? And so you just kind of work backwards. I tell people look at their goal and work backwards and set up the goals for each stage of the funnel. And then when they're looking at each stage of the funnel, then optimize the weak link and just always focus on optimizing the weakest link in the funnel. Mm-hmm. We got a question from Guest2445 who says, perhaps you could touch a little bit more on your thoughts of how to best use a crowdfunding campaign to build a business, not just a product.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think there's a couple different ways I would approach that. Is that when you're trying to build beyond just the product itself, you have to think, what is the product doing, and where are you going towards with that product? One great example is our friends at Pine64. They built basically a little Arduino board, and the idea behind it was they were going to start with just the board, and then they were going to branch out and then start adding accessories. So first it was just a 1 gigabyte HDMI output board, with 4K resolution. But then they started adding on their adapter sets. And so what they did is they kind of used the campaign itself to launch off that initial buzz and build their evangelists, and then offer products to help increase that experience, and then help build out the base into a larger group later on.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and true, because you have to think about, and I think what you're saying is you have to think beyond what this individual product was and think more about the problem you're solving in general, and what are the next steps, and what are the other types of people and other types of audiences you could reach out to that would be on board for your next steps of your business.
Definitely.
All right. So let's see. What did I say? I think we talked about this a lot, and I don't know if there's too much more to say, which is building a community of raving fans, because we talked about getting people on board with your message, getting people to accelerate, and how important that is. Let's talk about some of the techniques for lead generation. I think so in terms of building a community, think about how people should focus on driving traffic, and what are the most successful ways you see people as driving traffic to their campaigns.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, because I think that it really depends on the scope of the project and really what is the problem, or what are you addressing? What are you trying to solve by what you're running the campaign for? I think one of the most novel approaches I've seen is the use of the whole meetup culture, especially that's really big in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
There's out here we have a robotics meetup that meets once a month, has 200-300 people that come there, and what I see is a lot of early stage startups, or a lot of single guys who have a great idea. They bring their idea there, or they bring their mock-up, and they try to ingrain themselves in a community and then be a part of that. I think that is one of the best way to just do it. Don't be that anonymous face on a website. Be the person that could talk to your group in person, because that is the best way to build that relationship. And I've seen some projects that when you first looked at it, you're like, well, this is a little toy, but then you see the response that they got when they were actually talking to people in person, because I think you get a really honest opinion from that as well. and it just helps you develop your idea and then build it out so that again your fans become invested on what you're doing, and also they feel like they're part of the entire process.
Absolutely. What other? So I mean, that's in person, kind of in person engagement, kind of building the relationships in person to get fans. What you mentioned really briefly, like advertising earlier. How effective is advertising for people?
Advertising, it depends. I think that's a hard one. I think advertising is one of those things that you should think about last. I think advertising is trying to pick up, like the already built up excitement on the product to hit like that additional like channel. I think advertising definitely is something that you should look at, but I think that's one of those things that should be maybe a little bit later on. Like once you build out that base, which largely can't happen without that really one-on-one development. I think advertising can sometimes lose its message. And I think what a lot of people do is that they'll spend $300 on Facebook ads, they'll spend $600 on this. But again, they're not really identifying their crowd, so they're not ready for when when they're putting these ads out, they're targeting a segment that's not necessarily the one that's actually going to resonate with their crowd.
Yeah, because they haven't actually talked to their crowd very well, and so they don't know. They're going to have poorly performing ads, and they're not going to feel like they're getting their investment worth.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always heard the same thing. I mean, starting in person, starting small, and then even when you grow, advertising probably shouldn't count for more. And just rough number that I always hear people throw out is it shouldn't count for more than like 10% of your converted traffic, right? Because otherwise, you become way too dependent on a source where the prices can skyrocket, and you just don't know how much the prices are going to skyrocket for targeting keywords or the specific audience that you're after when a competitor gets into the space.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that's, I think especially one thing that startups I think one thing that startups should really focus on is the data itself. And take the time to look at the tools you have for your analytics, whether it would be something like a mix panel or Google Analytics or your Facebook ad analytics. Look at what's resonating and then build off of that as well. That's, those keywords, that's going to give you an idea, or those event tracking things will give you the best idea of what's really resonating with your crowd, so you can actually better make your advertising later on.
Yep. And then I also think taking beyond the in-person step and going to like the virtual meetup. Like I talk to people all the time. I have these products, and I say, well, I just did a quick Google search and I found this online community that really talks about, this fishing pole type thing that you're promoting. Like, have you gone there and talked to the fishermen on the online community? Like, oh no, should I? Yes, absolutely.
Of course, yeah.
You should go tell them about what you're doing because they might be interested and they might sign up and they might purchase something. And so I think like after you start getting the in-person message down, that's a great next step for people to find those online influencers and communities to start building up the list of raving fans.
And one thing to build on that I think is really important is that if you think you are addressing a need, do not think that you need to be shy about your message, or don't think you need to be shy about reaching out to these people. We see a lot of projects that, especially on the smaller ones, that they're like, well, we're not quite sure. We don't want to be those people that overwhelm their customer base. And I think that while there is a fine line of like being pushy and being spammy, you should always reach out to these organizations or these groups that you think that can benefit from what you do. Don't ever feel that you don't have the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people, there's a fine line being pushy and being spammy, but I tell people, like, what you should do is be genuine. You should go to these communities and ask them what they think about the idea and ask them for feedback on your campaign and ask them for feedback because, A, it's less spammy that way, but B, you should genuinely care what they have to say. Like,
absolutely.
You should genuinely care about their feedback and want to engage with them, and they say, oh, I don't get it. You should take that as a sign and say, wow, they don't get it. Like, I got to go do something, right?
Yep.
To fix that. And people often miss that step. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some kind of specifics when people are setting up the crowdfunding campaign. And there's some things to mention, like you've talked about on your blog and everything about optimizing for checkout. What does that do?
So optimizing the checkout is one thing, is that when you eventually, the biggest thing is getting the buyer to start the process. But one thing that a lot of campaigns tend to forget is that if your checkout is not clear, if it's not easy for them to convert, you're going to be losing money and you're going to be losing orders on the table because of the confusion. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've worked really hard at Celery to find ways of how can we make this process easier, quicker, faster, and simpler, So your buyers can have an experience very similar to what they're used to, whether it be Amazon.com or their own favorite online shopping stores. So the one thing that anybody should look at, regardless of the platform they use, is they should be testing, on a occasional basis, their own checkout flow.
Mm-hmm.
Is it quick enough? Am I doing, is it difficult to identify the shipping things? When we talk about optimization, yes, you could look for programs or you can look for sales carts or e-commerce solutions like Celery that have the game planned out. But another aspect people forget about is the additional fees like shipping and handling.
Mm-hmm.
If your buyer all of a sudden sees that the product, that was $99, but after taxes and shipping, it's almost $200. That's going to scare them away, and maybe because you showed it to them too late, that's actually going to impact their conversion rate. And we've actually seen it where that, complex shipping rules or expensive shipping has actually negatively impacted companies in a pretty significant way. So when we talk to optimization, it's not just the literal optimizing the cart itself, but it's optimizing the flow of your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Can your international customers go to the right place to get what they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to just be upfront and let people review what they're doing and be okay with it, with what they're having, so they're not surprised down the road of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody is looking at a checkout, and the mindset of people doing that is, why shouldn't I do this? And you don't want to give them an excuse as why they shouldn't do this or why they shouldn't continue on and engage with you as a company, because people are just naturally suspicious, and they should be. So that's why it's, like you said, keeping it simple and clear is so important. Let's talk about communication and order management.
Yeah, so that's something that's really applicable in the pre-order space, and I think that's something that a lot of campaigns tend to forget. One of the biggest issues we see is that campaigns, let's be honest, for the pre-order campaign, your product is not going to be available possibly for 3 to 6 to 9 months even. You may still be developing it. You may not be ready to ship. What happens in that meantime? Well, a couple things. If you use a system that does not collect the money up front, like ours, maybe your buyer, the card information has changed. Maybe they've moved to a new place. One of the downfalls, unfortunately, of using your standard, your crowdfunding platform, whether it be Indiegogo or Kickstarter or whatever, is that it makes it very difficult once the campaign is over. Let's say you have 1,000 people that have signed up or 1,000 people that have pledged. If they have no easy way of updating their information, you may end up losing their business, or you may end up losing their confidence because it's just been difficult for them to confirm, am I going to get this product now that I've moved to a new place? Something that Celery has done quite fun and well, I think, is that when someone orders something through our system, they receive email confirmations that has a link to their own personalized lookup dashboard where they're able to update their information if they move. They can update their payment information, contact information. If they need to cancel it, they can even do that. And I think the one thing that it does is not only does it help the buyer feel more, involved and help the buyer kind of self-service, but also reduces the support cost. If you look at some of the largest campaigns out there, if you have 10,000 backers that have backed your product, and now you're trying to worry about, okay, well, Mr. X has now changed and moved here. With a traditional crowdfunding platform, you have to do that all yourself, and there is no easy way for them to help you.
What does it mean to you to treat backers like investors?
So I think the one thing to keep in mind, especially with something like crowdfunding, is that traditionally, and if you go to the crowdfunding platforms, they call them pledges, right? You are investing in the idea. Like, your backers are there not necessarily just because they get the product, but because they want to be an early adopter. Obviously, if you were investing in someone's company, you would expect them to be transparent with you. You'd expect them to do the best to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve because you've invested in you've put your money into their product. Your buyers should have that. Your buyers should feel just as much that level of confidence and that level of trust with the seller, especially in the crowdfunding space. There's a lot of products out there. I think the drone space has definitely been negatively impacted by a couple projects that raised quite a lot of money but did not deliver anything at all. So because that's the case, you need to make sure that your buyers and your backers feel like they're a part of the process. They feel like they mean something to you at a personal level. I think that's one of the biggest things I would say that would make a campaign successful. Do the backers feel like they are properly invested? Do they feel like the investors that have also put money into the product as well?
Absolutely. So what does it mean to ship better and sell more?
It kind of goes back to my keep it simple mentality. When you're looking at shipping or when you're looking at trying to get your product into the hands of your buyers, you need to make it as simple as possible for them to check out and as simple as them to receive the product. Traditionally, a lot of e-commerce, a lot of people that made sales online, they would collect the orders, they would get everything in their house, they would manually kind of put the stamps on the box and they would send it out the door. I highly recommend looking at services like Shipwire, ShipStation. We both have native integrations with them, or just even looking at logistics partners. Or if you're going to do it yourself, kind of make sure you understand the checkout flow and how you can get your product to your customers in the quickest possible way when you're ready to ship.
And for doing it yourself, I think the big thing is people wholly underestimate the amount of effort that's involved there. I've talked to enough people now that have tried to do the ship it themselves, and they're like, "Oh, it's just a few hundred orders," and then they realize like how difficult it is to do all that.
Yes.
They're like, "Oh no, I was supposed to get them all out this week, and I'm not going to be able to get them all out this week." And like people tend to underestimate the effort that is involved and how efficiently other logistics companies and services can do it, and it is most likely worth their money to pay for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one other thing that kind of goes into that is that when you're looking at shipping a product or when you're looking to try to get it into the hands of your buyers, once you charge the card, and that's a big thing that happens with something like our system, once you charge the card, your buyers are not going to wait too long for their product. They don't want to have to wait that long. So if any impacts on shipping may also result in chargebacks, it may result in lower confidence. Again, you're gonna be betraying the trust that you're trying to build with your buyers.
Oh yeah, chargebacks lower confidence, and if nothing else, it hurts you down the line when you come out with another version of your next product. People are like, it wasn't that great an experience the first time around. Like,
yeah,
the experience. I've always been told, that the expression of like, your experience of buying something is not just the thing. It is the entire experience of browsing for it, finding it, discovering it, testing it, like walking to the checkout cart at the grocery store. What were they nice? Were they fast and efficient to check you out? Like all of this stuff plays into whether it's online or offline sales. The experience and will people come back has a lot more to do with just are they satisfied with the product.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Talk briefly about tools to recover lost leads.
So when I say lost leads, I think we've all seen it when we've gone to an online store. Maybe you were thinking about buying something, you put it in the cart, and then 2 days later you have an email on your desktop saying, "Hey, we saw that you bought something. Why don't you you saw that something in the cart? Why don't you come back? Here's 15% off to make it easier." This is a very, very interesting sales technique, and it's something that's actually growing a lot of traction right now. You should always, any information that you're capturing from your buyers, whether they just put, they're adding stuff to their cart, if they're putting their email in, you should be trying your hardest to gather that information and then following up with those buyers. The fact that you get them farther down the process is why you want to capture them later on. One thing that we do at Celery is that we actually, as soon as the buyers put their email in to the order page, we cookie that information, and then if the order is not completed, we'll send them a follow-up email, 12, 24 hours, it's up to the buyer, or it's up to the seller, and we'll let the buyers know, hey, we saw something was in the cart, did you want to convert? And actually, we've seen it definitely increase conversion rates for a bunch of our sellers, and it's definitely led us to believe that it's something that a lot of buyers should be looking at. There's a lot of different options out there, but we always, for us specifically, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Kind of something to what you're seeing right here, which is that, hey, we saw something in the cart, why don't you come back and here's a discount to make it easier. So definitely something that you guys should be looking to do as you guys move forward. Any of your buyers or any of you sellers out there, I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely. So let's see. Next we have, so I have a couple things. I want to show a couple little demos, but first, before I do that, because we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left, there was a question from Haim that says, what mechanism allows you to take money as you need it versus getting it all up front? Is it in escrow, or do your backers give it to you as you need it?
That's a great question. So with Celery, it's we know money is held in escrow. With some companies they'll do that, but with us specifically, what we do is that with our payment processor Stripe, when your backers or your buyers pre-order an item, we tokenize the information for payment, and then when you're ready to charge the cards from our dashboard, you'll just do one click and you could charge the cards. So it's coming in, you're charging the cards as you see fit. And that kind of flexibility really does help a lot of sellers, achieve what they're trying to achieve. Because let's be honest, we all kind of come into snags. We all, the production cycles can always change, and you have to kind of be ready to respond to the different things that are happening, possibly across the world. So yeah, the way we handle it is that when you're ready to charge a card, you can do it directly from the dashboard. And I highly recommend that if you have the, either look at Celery or look at another company that does that. It definitely helps you a lot more, because once you hold the money in escrow, you kind of run into the same problem that if you took it up front. That money is no longer in the accounts of the buyer who made the purchase, which means you're already on a clock. You only have about 3 to 6 months once the money has been exchanged before they start really feeling aggravated. And we've seen 3 to 6 months is where you'll start seeing the largest amount of chargebacks.
Cool. I want to show a couple ways people have integrated Celery and Kickoff Labs just as some demo sites for folks here. So what you're seeing now on your screen, and what everybody should be seeing now, is a really simple, not really built up a landing page, but a landing page that takes an email address, basically saying, like, let's start with step one. Like, you're interested in this product. Sign up and we'll get you half off, right? And so it's sort of easing people into the process and getting you an email address up front, and then let's say get access now, and then immediately I'm taken to a Celery shop where I can say, I could place my order at this point. That's just one simple way to do it, is like getting people to say yes and then getting them to the checkout page. Another way to look at it is having, again, a different landing page here, and you've got a landing page, descriptions of it, you answer some questions, and you've got this box that says sign up now to get half off, and you sign up now, and this is another way to do it where on the thank you page, which is hosted at Kickoff Labs here, you're thanking them for signing up and then giving them the option to pre-order as a call to action, as well as the option to share with friends to get the email address, and we will, in both cases, we also send the email address past the email address to the email address we send the referral link, so people can continue sharing it with friends that way. So just a couple simple things for people to think about when they think about their flow, how things can be really simple, how you can integrate both an email campaign and how you can take an email collection campaign and start adding these purchase options once you're ready to start adding the purchase options before you transition fully to, like, now we're just a website with a purchase option. And so people should think about their campaign in terms of those steps of first collecting emails, then adding a purchase option, then focusing 100% on the purchase. And I think those are kind of natural evolutions as building the business up as you go.
Yeah.
So let's see, does anybody have any other comments or questions in the chat? And while I wait to see if any other comments or questions come up in the chat, I'll say, Bhavin, is there anything that you kind of thought that we would talk about that we didn't talk about today?
No, I thought it was pretty comprehensive, and again, I just want to say it's been a lot of fun talking about e-commerce, and especially the whole pre-order campaigns. I think now is the time where I think a lot of people should be thinking about, would a self-hosted campaign be right for them? Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely something that all sellers need to kind of identify, and all people need to identify. But if you're going to do all the work anyways, and if you're going to have to build the audience organically, you might as well control the branding and control the message a bit clearer, alongside with giving yourself more options of how your buyers or how your backers can, be appreciated, or how they can go through the e-commerce aspect of it. So I just want to say again, thank you to Kickoff Labs for letting me come, and definitely if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a little bit right now, or please feel free to hit us up at help@, and just say you were at the webinar, and we'll definitely be able to catch up with you guys as well.
Cool. So that everybody knows, the recording of this will be sent out to people that signed up. Looked like we had about 30 to 40 people at a peak live that were attending. But we'll send out this to our email list when it's done, and we'll also get a good blog post written up about some of the best practice that come out of this that people will receive, and they'll have an opportunity to link to down the road. But immediately you'll be able to get the recording pretty soon after this if there's something you missed, and we'll, like I said, we'll promote the everything else from it. We'll come up with some other additional materials. There were a bunch of other links we didn't talk about that we'll throw in that email. From the Celery blog, there's some great resources you guys have posted up there that we'll link to people as well. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Bhavin for being making this conversation really easy to talk about e-commerce and pre-sales and crowdfunding. It's something that I can tell you guys are passionate about. You've got a great product, and thanks for coming on and chatting with us.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a real pleasure working with you guys, and to see what you guys have done, especially with Glowforge and your other clients. It's been a pleasure working with you guys, and I'd just like to say to all the guys out there, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We would love to help you guys achieve what you're trying to achieve with your pre-orders and your crowdfunding campaigns.
Cool. All right. With that, I'm Josh from Kickoff Labs. This was our interview with Celery and Bhavin. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.